Thanks, Jamie and Kelly and Ron and Gordon. This resettling and re-entry into American culture is a lot of people are aware of the challenges, and a lot of people are concerned. Our kids hinted at some of the difficulties, and finally at a meal in Brazil last year, I said, well, just tell us what you think we're going to face, what difficulties we're going to have. And they spent pretty much most of the meal telling us all the difficulties. And so, but we continued with our decision to return to the States. But thank you for the people that are praying for us. We're so grateful. I'm not sure that every elder and deacon and person involved in bringing us back and giving us what you've given us and helped us really understands what we're going through. But irregardless, you've been really incredible, and we're deeply grateful for this reception. And we're grateful for not scheduling tonight on next Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday. But just to give you an idea of how prepared we are, we've been preparing for this for about a year, and I kept my Blockbuster card, and so I don't have to go through the red tape of getting a new Blockbuster card to play videos on my video cassette, because we kept that too, the video cassette. So I think we're ready to face the challenges of this culture here. I'm not going to be able to mention everyone and thanking everyone. It'll sound a little like the Oscars. They lack eloquence because they just read off this list, and so I'm not going to do that tonight. But I did want to tell you about the first year on the field. There were only like 3 channels back then, and they were in Portuguese, and so watching television was not relaxing. So the first year on the field, among other things I did, I read all of Lord of the Rings, including The Hobbit. And so it's appropriate that I begin with the interchange between Gandalf and Bilbo Baggins. So Gandalf says to Bilbo, I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure that I'm arranging, and it's very difficult to find anyone. And so Bilbo responds, well, we are plain quiet folk and have no use for adventures, nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things. They make you late for dinner. And so what an adventure it's been for us. Began, I guess, a little over 35 years ago, the campus ministry in Springfield, Missouri. And we were going to go into campus ministry. All of our best friends were going to be campus ministers until I read a pamphlet talking about affirming God's will for your life. And the author challenged us. He said that 90% of the ministers are ministering to where 10% of the Christians are, and 10% of the ministers are where 90% are not Christian. And that really struck me. And he said, most of us think if God wants me to be a missionary, let him show me. He says, why don't we take a different tact and say, I'm going to be a missionary unless God shows me otherwise. So I told Gil about it, and that's really what called us to the mission field. And we set a date a year from that date and said we're going to pray, and God's going to either show us something else or we're going to be missionaries. And I attended the ACU Mission Summer Seminar. It was so impactful that I called Gail. She drove to Abilene to spend a weekend with me. I said, I can't describe what's going on. About a month before that deadline, we really started praying and gathered our friends, said, hey, listen, I don't think God's got the message. At about that time, the church in Springfield was starting an effort to plant a church in Brazil's capital, fully support 3 couples. And so there was the perfect storm, and that's what happened. That's how the adventure began. Well, two people I'll bring up tonight, what they said about our ministry, and I think the explanation that the others gave was insightful, but resonate with our ministry and how different it was. Bob Chisholm, we invited him to speak at the missionary conference, and afterwards he came by Curitiba, visited us. In it, we had the leaders together that we work with. And he came back and he gave an excellent report, a better report than I've ever given about our ministry. And I think he just was very eloquent and very convincing about our ministry was not typical, and yet in many ways he likened it to Paul's ministry. Paul had missionary journeys. He didn't stay in one place. He worked with leaders, church planters. He traveled to where they were. He strengthened leaders. He assisted in new church plants. And that was the first time I heard someone besides me talk about our ministry in a way that I thought, yeah, I think you understand it, Bob. And I have it in print if you want a copy of it. But that really, we always felt like the weird uncle at Thanksgiving dinner. And I felt that's how we were treated in Church of Christ Missions. We didn't feel that way. We knew and we were convinced about what we were doing. That not a lot of direct baptisms, and it seems like Paul mentioned that about how many baptisms he did not have. And so, and then there was an elder in Indiana on the campus of, speaking of Aggies, of University of Indiana, and we were supported by them for a while, and partially supported. And they had very insightful questions. He says, if I understand correctly your ministry, the scope and the magnitude and the impact, your mission is to care for ministers, helping them to thrive, to be healthy emotionally, spiritually, and relationally. In fact, your ministry through these national ministers and missionaries is responsible for more conversions than the typical missionary. He says the typical missionary might have 20, 30 baptisms. You're responsible for many missionaries having many baptisms. Well, I seldom get the urge to kiss an elder, but that was one of the times. And it was just a magic moment for me in ministry that someone really understood it. And I say that among the many ways Gail has described me for nearly 40 years, one of the things is I'm a nonconformist, very, very diplomatic. But I don't think the same way everyone does, and I don't see things the same way everyone does, and I bring a different kind of angle to things. And so there's a word in Portuguese called suportar, and it sounds like support. And so this is like my supporting church is Preston Crest, but it's really a false cognate. It means the opposite. It really means to put up with, okay? And so when you say somebody's been suportando, they've really been putting up with him for many, many years. And so this outside-of-the-box mission effort that I do believe reflects, in many ways, Paul's, I know it's not easy to work with, and I'm a nonconformist. And so to George and DG and Brian Gibbs especially, and to Gail and the kids, and to Jamie and all the people who've had to work with me, you have my deepest sympathy. Because to do what we've had to do, I've had to be a different type of person. However, you don't have my apologies, because it's just amazing how much God has done with so little as I reflect on my life. And so I really, you have my deepest respect. The elders here who supported us for about 13 or 14 years, all the people work with us, and my kids and my wife especially, who had to live with me. How many of you can name an astronaut? Raise your hand if you can name one astronaut. Okay? Neil Armstrong, Alan Shepard, John Glenn, Sally Ride, almost all of us can name, I could name several. I just loved aeronautics. And how many of you can name one person who's worked at NASA? Raise your hand, please. Okay, probably either you did, a relative did, so we have about 3 or 4 people. Okay. That reminds me of mission work. There have only been 12 men who've actually stepped on the moon. But it took thousands of NASA employees giving superhuman efforts and man and woman hours to place those people in space in this hostile, different environment. And I don't know where I don't know if this is out of style to send missionaries, but it's taken a lot of people anonymously to keep us going in Brazil for so long. And a lot of people, just like NASA, you don't know who they are, but we couldn't have done it without so many churches and people who were visionary, who caught the vision and saw the importance of reaching out to the lost, and we're indebted to you. I'd like to mention just a few heroes. One is Gail's mom, and she's not here. But she has supported us financially. She has visited us too many times. I mean, a lot of times. I say mother-in-law jokes, but none of them pertain to Mary. She's been tremendous supporter and has prayed for us and has sent us Baptist money, and we spend it gladly. But, and for about 25 years, every Sunday night, she wrote a letter to us and sent it to us in Brazil. So she's one of my heroes. Another hero is my mom, and you need to understand two things about her. On July 4th, 1980, we received a telegram from Ellis Long saying, "You have been granted permanent visas to Brazil." And at that time, we were among the last missionaries to receive permanent visas. Before we went to the field, it's a long, drawn-out process now. We got them, and we were elated. We're going to Brazil. We can live there forever. Permanent visas. My mom hated the idea. She did not want me to go to Brazil, and she spent the next 3 days locked in her bedroom. And the other thing you have to understand, my mom raised 3 boys. My older brother is mentally retarded. He's still alive. He's where I got my humor from. He's the funniest guy in the world. And so she took care of him and 2 boys and my dad. That's 4 boys by my count. And her only dream was to have a girl. That time passed. Okay, she wanted a granddaughter. And after we'd been on the field for about 3 years, we had a daughter and a granddaughter at the same time. Angela was born. And if you want to know what Angela's like, spend about 10 minutes with Isabel, and you'll have a pretty good idea what Angela was like. And for my mom, this was like the restoration of the Garden of Eden. This was perfection. This was heaven on earth. And she finally got the girl she wanted, and she visited us. About a year later, we were in the midst of a decision whether we should stay on for 5 years or go beyond that 5-year commitment. And it was a really tough decision because we had not planned. We're staying 5 years and I'm out of here, okay? And at that time, my mom contracted cancer again. She'd had lung cancer, had most of a lung removed. And after 6 years, it's supposed to be, in remission, it returned. But she didn't tell us. And because she knew if she told us, we'd go back. And so we've been on the field 28 years because of her decision. And that's the only thing really that in life that mattered to her was Angela. And so in my mind, she gave her life so that hundreds, and these guys aren't exact, hundreds of lives have been affected. And so my mom's a hero to me. So there are a lot of real heroes, and I'm certainly not one of them. Gail's my hero. She's a linguistic genius, and adapting to another culture, she's incredible, puts me to shame, and she's the real missionary in the family. But other than that, most of the rest is not according to her nature. Fundraising, not knowing how much money you're going to get every month, moving, traveling, being in the public eye, doing things in public, standing next to me in public, all that stuff, okay? And it's just against her nature. She likes stability. That's her nature. And so almost everything she had to do was, except for speaking the language incredibly, was a stretch for her and outside her comfort zone. And so Gail is one of my heroes. And because of that, literally hundreds of women ministers' lives were impacted and changed. So Gail's one of my kids are my heroes. They continue to challenge and inspire me and humble me. And the deacons and elders who and just regular members who anonymously helped and sacrificed and prayed and contributed and encouraged and sacrificed and committed to and visited and supported and loved and forgave and put up with. Like my mom, they didn't get many of the rewards we got, because, one thing we did get for 33 years, we had ringside seats to unbelievable, undescribable transformations. We would go to a team on the first day that they weren't speaking to each other. And when we left 5 days later, they were working together, and they had resolved a lot of differences. Marriages were breaking up, ministers going to leave the field, missionaries coming back home, and we got to see it. We got to see it, but there's all of these people who didn't get to see that. And yet you continue to give and to contribute and to partner with us. And so you are my heroes. And we're indebted how you as the body of Christ function. And so I bring all this up not to tell you what we did, but to affirm and remind you of what you did. To affirm and remind you of what you did by God's grace, how you transform people that you won't see until you go to heaven. And so you really are my heroes. And I am so indebted to you, Gail and I are, of how through his generous grace, God worked through you to transform the church and a nation. And so Bilbo to Gandalf, before he commits to the adventure, continues, I should like to know about the risks, out-of-pocket expenses, time required, remuneration, and so forth, by which he meant, what am I going to get out of it, and am I going to come back alive? And we came back alive. But I guess by so many standards, we really didn't make a good decision. By so many standards, we went against the grain. By so many standards, as we look at people who did the same things we did, went to the same graduate classes and got the same degrees, we're at totally different places. And by many standards, it wasn't very smart. It wasn't very wise professionally. But life. And we came back not just alive, but fully alive. And we left people fully alive in Christ. And so we look at people of different races and every socioeconomic class that you can imagine, and we were able to see the face of Christ in them. And as we look out on you all and people who aren't here, we also see the face of Christ. And we're grateful. Well, since we're quoting Dr. Seuss and other great theologians, I'll read, I'm going to close with Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I would ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Thank you so much.